Hello and welcome to cEDH Budget Brews. I'm Tim, and tonight I'm continuing my series of beginning cEDH Meta Busters. I'm going to talk about Tymna Kraum Blue Farm. Before I get started, please check out our Patreon and our Discord. Links are in the description below. And if you like our content, please hit that like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out a lot. And without further ado, let's get started. So, in case you've been living under a rock, Blue Farm is a Tymna Kraum mid-range ad nauseum and breach deck. Its main win con is going to be Consult Oracle, and it has a couple of layered backup lines as well. So the basic plan with Blue Farm is you want to really leverage Tymna and Kraum early, and then use the semi-evasive creatures that you have access to in these colors to gain just lots of card advantage. I mean, I will maul to 4 if I can get a turn 1 Kraum out. That is not uncommon. And then I will follow it up with a Tymna. Because if you can land a Kraum early, your opponents, especially in cEDH, will want to chain multiple spells in a turn, and you'll get multiple triggers off Kraum. I mean, it is not uncommon to draw like 2 to 3 cards in a turn cycle, depending on when you position it down and where you're seeding. And then it being a flyer, you're able to kind of leverage those Tymna draws very effectively. You're almost always going to have somebody that you can attack and get a card off of. And it's really the best colors and the best pairing. While it hasn't won the most events, if I was to say like a deck that has the best card pool, I would definitely say that Tymna Kraum Blue Farm probably has access to it, bar none. It just has all the tools. It can be a little bit of a challenge to get the lines down, but once you get them down, it's almost like playing cEDH on easy mode. In fact, oftentimes the biggest complaint about the deck is that it kind of feels like you're playing on easy mode, and sometimes that's not what people kind of sign up for, and that's probably a lot of the reason. I mean, at least my conjecture is why you don't see it more in the wild, and why it's not played as much at tournaments. It's certainly not for like how well position it is and how well the card pool is. So I'm highlighting my version of the deck. It is a little atypical, or at least atypical compared to some of the other versions. I lean really hard into just as many instances of card draw, especially card draw that has high ceilings. Like I stated earlier, I mean, technically, Kraum can draw you 12 cards in a turn cycle. That's not common. You probably get 1 or 2. Tymna can draw you 3 cards a turn cycle on your turn, when in reality, she probably only draws you 1 or 2. Same thing with like the Archivist. This is a new addition from Baldur's Gate, Commander Legends 2. Again, I mean, every time somebody cracks a fetch land, they cast a tutor, they do any of those things, especially like fetch lands. Those are very common. You get a card off of it. Like the life gain's not really why we're playing this. It's mostly because it'll draw us a lot of cards off of the searches. And if they're not searching, like if they're not cracking fetches because this is out, then we're ahead anyway. Same thing with Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel technically can draw us up to 12 cards in a turn cycle. Again, it will probably most commonly draw you 1 or 2, like per round of the table. But the thing is, though, is with these are all passive. That is kind of one of the biggest things with Blue Farm, is you just have all of this passive card draw. You just kind of like Rompo Peel, that old rotisserie that they used to have on the infomercials back in the day. You just set it and forget it. You just play the Esper Sentinel. It triggers when somebody does something. You don't have to put any more mana into it. It's the same thing with the Archivist. You just cast it, and then you just set it and forget it. It just does what it does. You know, same thing with Ragavan. Ragavan's only 1 card per turn cycle if it connects, and only 1 mana. But again, you just pay the mana once, and you keep swinging. And then that layers with Tymna, obviously. All of these layer with Tymna. It's the same thing with Sig. Sig can technically draw you 3 cards per turn cycle. It's low mana, and you just play it, and then when the conditions are met, you get your card. Ledger Shredder, not only does it get beefy real fast, it isn't card advantage, it's more card selection, but it is not uncommon for this to, again, filter you 2 or 3 cards per turn cycle, and it could technically draw you up to 16 cards on a turn cycle. Granted, that's the ceiling, and that's not, like, common or really obtainable, but that is the max that it can do. That is the ceiling. If every turn everybody casts 2 cards, it will trigger, and this thing will get huge. But it is not uncommon for it to trigger once or twice per turn cycle. Just like Kraum. Like, there's a reason why we're playing all of these things, and it's because they're passive. And then with that in mind, we're also running Rhystic Study, Mystic Remora. Again, the greedier they go, the less they pay, the more you get. But it's just more passive card draw. Like, the name of the game with Tymna Kraum is you mulligan to something aggressive, you dump your hand, and then you use those passive ways to get card draw and fill your hand back up. And then in the mid game, you Naws, you peer, you breach, you do those things, and then you consult. So it does have a relatively, it kind of has a medium floor, as far as its learning curve is concerned. But the ceiling on the deck isn't that high. It's just got such a high card quality, such a good combination of colors that kind of, once you get the basics down, you can really just the gap between being marginally proficient at the deck and playing it 100% optimally isn't really that far off. And therein lies kind of where people kind of get bored with it, just because you always feel you never really feel like you're out of the game. And even if you are, you swap out 3 cards and you're good to go. So some of the main differences with my deck is, one, I'm running Sig. That's not common. I'm running Toxic Deluge. That doesn't see a lot of play. I'm also on March. I think that's probably getting more widely adopted now, but I put this in right away and haven't been sad. I am running a slightly higher rock count than, say, the DDB list. And here's the big shocker. I'm only on 26 lanes. Now, the reason is because you have so much passive card draw that when you aggressively mulligan for those engines and being able to deploy them early, you'll have so much card draw, you'll get so many cards, you'll see so many cards that you're able to keep making your land drops. I goldfish this deck about 400 games on top of everything I've actually played it, and I played it a lot. And I found that I was drawing on average about 2.8 cards per turn cycle. I was using kind of like a random number generator. And again, this is just kind of an experiment, but as long as I was able to keep that pacing up, which is not hard to do when you have Tymna Kraum and then a Remora out or something, those are not unsightly board states with this deck. You're able to compensate for such a low land count and still make your drops and still execute your game plan. So at its basis, you're going to use that card draw and rituals to be able to leverage ad nauseum. So you play Dockside, you're playing Dark Writ, you're playing Cabal Writ, Calling of the Weak, Reign of Filth, Rite of Flame, all of these, not to mention just all the good rocks to help you Naws effectively. And you can pretty reasonably main phase Naws with this deck and expect to win. And then you leverage Underworld Breach. And then you go from there, you'll use Brain Freeze to self-mill, play more rocks, play LED a bunch of times, and then eventually you'll wind up with Thassa's Oracle and you win that way. Or if for some reason Thassa's Oracle is offline, you can always Praetor's Grasp once or twice and assemble some kind of win con from your opponents. one that I did, I was actually playing in a Sans Black Pod. I was the only black deck. I was playing against a Dawnwaker Thrasios. I was playing against a Light Paws. And I was playing against, oh my god, what was the last deck? I think it was a Savala. And what I wound up doing was I actually wound up snagging the finale from the Dawnwaker deck. And wound up milling myself, making a bunch of mana, playing all my creatures out. And then and then playing LED over and, or not LED, playing something over and over again. Yeah, that was it. I played LED a bunch of times, and then I Praetor's Grassed the finale after I'd played all my creatures, and then just made them all big swole and swung out because they get haste, and I just made them like huge, and that did the job. So like you never like, especially I really like P-Grasp in here. It's kind of a tech card for me because I don't always see that you need it in the deck, but if you're playing in a meta where you'll run into a lot of random decks, so you're not always like, especially like decks that like to exile your yard, it's really good to have in there because it'll help you assemble a win after you have Nosed, if for some reason your Oracle's shut off or it gets exiled or whatever. But it just really, really has the tools to kind of execute what you need. You can win off of, like, one of the big lines with this is you can just cast an Intuition and assemble a win because you get LED, you get Breach, and then you get Savine's Wreck. Like, you're good from there. Flashback to Savine's Wreck, you get your Breach, your LED back, then you cast it, and then you just do the, then you cast the, as long as you got 3 cards, you can cast the leftover after the LED and all that. You just cast the Intuition again and get your Brain Freeze and go from there. So, there are some other, like, kind of, there's some other options in here. Sometimes I'll slot in, like, Peer in the Abyss. I found I haven't needed it, especially of late. If you're in a big wheel meta or your game goes long, Mnemonic Betrayal is really good. Sometimes I'll play Mind Break Trap. Sometimes I don't. Dress Down is another good tech card. I understand it shuts off a lot of your passive card draw engines, but it's got flash, it replaces itself, and it stops like Dockside shenanigans, stuff like that. So, with that in mind, I think I'll wrap up. Just to reiterate, it's while it's not a spicy deck, it's a very consistent deck. It will definitely teach you the fundamentals. It's got a very good card quality, great card pool. It's a good deck to learn on because it just gives you all the basic tools you need to effectively learn cEDH. And it has very few poor matchups. Like, I kind of think of this deck as like the legacy equivalent of like Delver decks, where you just don't really like have any bad matchups, but you also don't have like super favored ones either. So again, please hit that like, share, subscribe, and thanks again. Have a good night.